Greetings and welcome friends, I'm Ash and today I'd like to give you a hand with a game that has absolutely consumed my past few weeks, and that game is Helldivers 2. As I've noted throughout my review, Helldivers 2 is a remarkably challenging game despite its somewhat carefree attitude. This mostly comes from the simple fact that our characters are not superheroes. Getting run over by the bug version of a bulldozer or hit in the face with a rocket will generally kill you outright, even if you're wearing an entire fridge's worth of armor. So in order to help you not only survive these circumstances, but also thrive against both the Automatons and the Terminids, allow me to share with you some important tricks and strategies I uncovered after more than 80 hours of playtime. Without further ado, let us begin. Once you get past the first 3 difficulty tiers, Helldivers 2 is going to start throwing heavily armored enemies your way. These elite enemies take massively reduced damage from small arms fire, and as such you'll need specialized tools in order to deal with them. These include dedicated anti-armor stratagems like the 500 kilo bomb, the disposable rocket launchers, or even the versatile weapons like the autocannon that can do a little bit of damage to everything. Regardless of what your preference may be, make sure you are always carrying some way to deal with armored enemies, as those are always going to be the biggest threat on the battlefield. And if you want to be extra safe, bring multiple anti-armor stratagems, as you never really know when you'll need to suddenly help out your teammate with their Bile Titan problem. In most shooters, aiming for the enemy's head and weak points is the best way to bring them down. Helldivers 2 is no different in this regard, though, unlike most shooters, the difference between normal and weak point hits is absolutely massive. For example, a single shot from a railgun directly to an automaton mech's eye socket will instantly kill it. On the other hand, even near misses will deal significantly less damage and allow the mech to continue charging at you while firing rockets or spewing fire. So when it comes to Helldivers 2's combat, it is all about the quality rather than the quantity of your shots. Speaking of shooting, Helldivers 2's weapons have different types of accuracy based on what you're doing. It's nothing too complicated, though it is definitely important to know. If you're moving, you're going to be quite inaccurate. If you're standing, you're going to be mostly okay at aiming. On the other hand, if you're crouching or laying prone, then you're going to be able to aim with even the heaviest weapons without too much trouble. So if you're trying to make an important shot, do make sure to at least stop and crouch down. While Helldivers 2 doesn't have a weapon upgrade system like the one found in the original, you can still tweak small things about some of your weapons. This includes things like changing the firing mode, choosing whether you want the flashlight on and off, or activating a special feature your weapon might have. You can do this by holding reload, which is R by default on PC, and then selecting whatever mode you want. For most weapons, you can simply stick to the default and be perfectly fine, though I would recommend experimenting, as changing the firing mode can help you conserve ammo. However, when it comes to the railgun, swapping to the unsafe mode is almost mandatory in order to unlock its true potential. This is because the unsafe mode massively increases your damage in exchange for a chance to blow up if you push it too far. It is a high risk, but it is also a massive reward. Much like every other co-op shooter, sticking with your team is generally a good idea in Helldivers 2. This gives you increased firepower, more tools to deal with problematic enemies, the ability to clear objectives faster, and, if you have the right emote, as many hugs as you can wish for. That said, don't actually stand close to other people, at least not for long. Weapons, grenades, and stratagems all deal massive amounts of friendly fire damage, and it is very easy to get killed by a teammate that's desperately trying to defend themselves. Instead, your best bet is to always stay a respectable distance from everyone, though always in view so you can support each other whenever anyone gets swarmed. This leads directly into one of Helldivers 2's most important lessons. You don't have to kill every single bug or bot in existence. Running away to fight another day is not only a perfectly valid strategy, but perhaps the most impactful one, especially on the higher difficulties. The reason this is the case is because the enemies are not omniscient. If you run away from them and hide, they're not going to be able to find you, and eventually they will give up. So rather than waste 10 minutes and most of your respawns fighting against endless hordes of enemies, you can just take a 30-second detour and just lose them that way. This goes doubly so if you're losing control of an objective. Rather than fight to the bitter end and inevitably lose, you can drag all of the enemies away from the important bits, then sneak back in later to complete the mission before they even realize what's going on. While the March 6th update has made armor slightly better, the unfortunate reality is that no matter how many layers of steel you slap onto yourself, a horde of bugs is going to tear through it without too much trouble. As such, I would highly recommend sticking to light armor. Light armor is significantly faster than heavy armor, gives you massively increased stamina regeneration compared to heavy armor, and, most importantly of all, is survivable enough that you can still take a hit or two before dying. So given how important mobility is in Helldivers 2, light armor is the clear winner regardless of what difficulty you're playing on. Helldivers 2 gives you the ability to, rather ungracefully, dive in any direction in order to avoid damage. You can do this by pressing Alt on PC. This fish flop might look pathetic at first glance, but it is actually an insanely powerful ability and one you should use frequently. And I'm not even talking about the expected use of the dive, things like avoiding chargers or bile titans. Rather, I'm talking about using it to push your way through hordes or avoiding death while being shot at by an entire automaton base. Even if you're surrounded by 20 bugs, repeatedly diving forward will give you a pretty solid chance to avoid damage as the enemies just won't know what to do with you. It's not a magical shield, and you will get killed if you get stuck in a horde for too long, but more often than not, tactically roleplaying a fish will get you out of trouble. Every single map, regardless of difficulty, has a variety of outposts, hidden bunkers, and various side objectives for you to find. You can do so by either keeping an eye out for any strange structures or various rock formations, or by moving towards the question marker on your compass, which appears when you're somewhat close to the location. They are always worth seeking out and looting, even if they do sometimes come equipped with guards. This is because these locations can give you experience, samples that let you purchase upgrades, medals that let you unlock new weapons and cosmetics, super credits, which can be used to purchase the battle pass or the cash shop items, or even immensely useful tools like the Steve artillery platform for that specific mission. So don't just rush from one objective to another, do the occasional detour and you will be awarded. While you cannot lose medals, credits, or super credits once you've acquired them, you absolutely can lose samples. Whenever you're killed, they'll be dropped onto the floor and must be picked up by you or someone else, and then taken to extraction in order for them to actually count. As such, it is of the utmost importance to go back and collect your samples whenever you respawn. Similarly, if your teammate kicks the bucket and you can grab their samples reasonably safely, do so. All of the collectibles are shared, so all that really matters is that someone, anyone, makes it onto the Pelican extraction ship with them in tow. If you have a particularly large batch of samples and you're worried about losing them, there is also one little trick you can do. Simply walk to the extraction zone ahead of schedule, hold X on PC to access your inventory, and then just safely drop the samples right at the finish line. That way, once you're ready to extract, you'll be able to pick them up and instantly leave, thus avoiding a lot of the risk that comes with carrying them around. Once you call for extraction, enemy patrols are going to start spawning all around you. Unless you're the master of stealth, chances are good you're going to have an intense battle against an immense amount of enemies before you're finally able to leave. As such, it is absolutely critical to not make this situation worse on yourself by dragging a massive horde of enemies directly to you. Instead, take a detour, ditch them in the middle of nowhere, and then go to the extraction once the coast is clear. This way, you'll have to fight a lot less enemies, and on the higher difficulties, a lot less armored enemies, since those are the ones that are most likely to hound you across the entire map. The same goes for the objectives. If you want to do objectives as quickly and smoothly as possible, do your best not to drag the fight to them. As long as you can get in semi-quietly and start working on the terminal, chances are good you'll be able to finish before the enemy presence becomes big enough to pose an actual threat. So if you can, try to be sneaky. And there you have it, 11 simple tips that will hopefully make your early days in Helldivers 2 nice and pleasant. Well, despite the whole bug infestation thing anyway. That said, Helldivers 2 is quite a challenging game, and, more so than any game I've done guides for, one that is going to wipe the floor with you quite frequently regardless of how well you play. As such, my final word of advice is to not get discouraged by failure, because it is going to be a frequent companion. After all, Helldivers 2 is a story about cannon fodder beating the odds and rising triumphant. So whenever the game kicks you down, just bounce back up and show those bugs the explosive power of freedom. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you would like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, pet your bug, and do whatever nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you again for watching, and I do hope to see you soon. Bye bye!